The day my own son looked into my eyes and quietly said, "Mom, you're becoming a burden," something inside me did not break. It simply became silent. I smiled anyway. That was the strange thing about mothers. Even when our hearts shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, we still worried about whether our children had eaten lunch. My name is Eleanor Brooks. I am 78 years old, and until that afternoon, I believed I had lived a beautiful life. Not a perfect one. Just a life filled with ordinary miracles. I still remembered the tiny apartment where my husband Daniel and I began our marriage. Rain leaked through the roof every spring, and in winter we covered the windows with old blankets, because we couldn't afford proper insulation. We laughed through those years. Sometimes dinner was nothing more than bread, butter, and warm tea. Daniel would raise his chipped cup and grin. One day, he'd say, "Our children will never know this kind of struggle." And I believed him. When our son Michael was born, I thought heaven itself had wrapped its arms around me. He had bright little eyes and tiny fingers that clung to mine with unbelievable strength. I whispered promises over his crib every night. "I'll always protect you." Children never hear those promises. Mothers never stop keeping them. Daniel worked overtime. I cleaned houses. I sewed clothes for neighbors until my fingers ached so badly I couldn't straighten them in the mornings. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every scraped knee. Every school play. Every nightmare. We were there. When Michael wanted a bicycle, Daniel secretly sold his prized fishing boat. When Michael dreamed of college, I quietly sold the pearl necklace my mother had left me. I told everyone I had misplaced it. The truth stayed locked inside my heart. A mother doesn't count sacrifices. She simply makes them. Years passed faster than I could understand. Michael graduated. Found a wonderful job. Married a bright, confident woman named Vanessa. Soon they had 2 beautiful children. For a while, life felt complete. Daniel and I became grandparents. Our house echoed with tiny footsteps again. Little Emma loved baking cookies with me. Jacob always begged Grandpa for stories about pirates and buried treasure. Those afternoons were worth more than every dollar we'd ever earned. Then life reminded us that happiness never signs a permanent contract. Daniel became sick. At first, it was only exhaustion. Then hospital visits. Then specialists. Then whispered conversations outside his room that doctors believed I couldn't hear. Cancer. Aggressive. Unforgiving. The treatments took his strength long before they took his life. One evening, he reached for my trembling hand. "Eleanor." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else." I squeezed his hand. "So have you." He smiled. "No." His eyes filled with tears. "You gave more." I laughed softly, because I couldn't bear to cry in front of him. "If we're counting," I teased, "you still owe me breakfast in bed from our anniversary in 1984. He actually chuckled. Even with tubes running across his chest. Even while death waited patiently outside the door. "I'll make it up to you someday." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. After the funeral, silence became my closest companion. The old house suddenly felt enormous. Every room carried Daniel's laughter like a ghost refusing to leave. His favorite chair remained untouched. His reading glasses stayed beside the newspaper exactly where he'd left them. For months, I couldn't move them. If I did, it would feel too real. Michael visited less often. I understood. He had work. Children. Responsibilities. Life moves forward for the young, even while it stands painfully still for the old. Then the phone calls became shorter. Visits became holidays. Holidays became excuses. Maybe next weekend, Mom. We're really busy. The kids have activities. I'll call tomorrow. Tomorrow quietly became next month. One rainy evening, I slipped while carrying groceries into the house. The neighbors found me lying beside the front steps. My hip wasn't broken. Only bruised. But something else had cracked. My confidence. The doctor looked kindly at Michael. She shouldn't be living alone anymore. Michael nodded. Vanessa nodded too. For the first time in months, they insisted I move into their home. I thought my loneliness had finally ended. I packed only one suitcase. A family photo. Daniel's wedding ring. My favorite sweater. And the old journal I had written in almost every night for 47 years. I stood at my front door one last time. I touched the faded wooden frame Daniel had painted decades earlier. "Take care of our home," I whispered. It almost felt as though the walls answered goodbye. When I arrived, Emma hugged me tightly. "I missed you, Grandma." My eyes filled instantly. Maybe everything was going to be all right after all. Maybe families simply lost their rhythm sometimes. Maybe love always found its way home. I wanted to believe that. Oh, how desperately I wanted to believe it. But some storms don't announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes they arrive wearing familiar faces. And before the first month ended, I overheard a conversation upstairs that would change everything I thought I knew about the family I had spent my entire life building. And I had no idea those whispered words would eventually lead every one of us into a lawyer's office, where the final page of an old envelope would leave the entire room frozen in stunned silence. I'll continue the story. The first few weeks in Michael's house felt almost peaceful. I woke before everyone else, just as I always had. Old habits never really disappear. I quietly made breakfast, packed Emma's lunch, folded laundry that no one had asked me to fold, and watered the flowers on the porch before the sun climbed over the trees. Vanessa smiled politely. "Thank you, Eleanor." Always Eleanor. Never Mom. I told myself not everyone expressed love the same way. Michael seemed happy that I was helping. Sometimes he'd kiss my forehead before leaving for work. "You don't have to do all this, Mom." But he never stopped me. And I didn't mind. Doing things for the people I loved had always been my way of saying, "I'm still here." Emma would rush into the kitchen every morning, wrapping her little arms around my waist. "Grandma, your pancakes taste better than Mom's." I laughed and pressed a finger against my lips. "That's our little secret." She giggled so hard that syrup nearly spilled across the table. Jacob wasn't as talkative, but every evening he'd quietly bring me one of his toy cars. "Want to race?" I always lost on purpose. He always celebrated like he'd won the world championship. Children have a beautiful way of making old hearts feel young again. For a while, I truly believed I had found my place. Until small things began to change. Vanessa started locking the pantry. She counted groceries. One afternoon she frowned at the electric bill lying on the kitchen counter. "This bill has gone up again." She wasn't speaking to me. But she made sure I heard. Another day, she sighed while carrying laundry. "Ever since there have been 5 people in this house, everything costs more." I quietly picked up the basket from her hands. "I'll do it." She smiled. Not warmly. Just enough to let me carry the weight. Weeks became months. I noticed my favorite chair in the living room slowly filling with unopened mail and shopping bags. Whenever guests visited, Vanessa gently suggested I spend time upstairs. You must be tired. The words sounded caring. The meaning didn't. One Saturday afternoon, Michael invited friends from work over for dinner. I wore Daniel's favorite blue sweater. Emma clapped happily. You look pretty, Grandma. Those 5 words warmed me more than the sweater ever could. As I walked toward the dining room carrying fresh bread, Vanessa suddenly stepped in front of me. We've already set enough places. I looked at the table. 6 chairs. There were 7 people in the house. Oh. I whispered. I can eat later. She nodded without looking into my eyes. That might be easier. Michael stood only a few feet away. He heard every word. He lowered his head. He said nothing. Not one word. That silence hurt far more than anything Vanessa could have said. I waited upstairs until I heard laughter drifting through the floorboards. Glasses clinked. Music played. Someone joked loudly. Everyone laughed. I smiled to myself. Then tears rolled quietly onto my hands. I wasn't crying because I had missed dinner. I was crying because, for the first time in my life, I felt like a visitor inside my own family. Later that night, Emma knocked softly on my bedroom door. She carried a small plate wrapped in aluminum foil. I saved you some chicken. Her tiny voice trembled. They forgot. Forgot. Such a small word. Such a heavy one. I hugged her tightly. No, sweetheart. They were just busy. She looked into my eyes. Children know when adults lie. She placed her little hand against my cheek. You can cry if you want. That was all it took. The tears I had been swallowing for months escaped all at once. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet tears that seemed to carry 40 years of memories with them. Emma hugged me without saying another word. Sometimes children comfort us better than adults ever can. A few days later, I found Daniel's old wedding ring inside my jewelry box. I slipped it into my hand. I miss you, I whispered. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. The house was silent. But somehow, I almost imagined hearing his familiar voice. You're stronger than you think. Maybe grief plays tricks on lonely people. Or maybe love never completely leaves us. The following week, I accidentally overheard Vanessa speaking on the phone. I don't know how much longer I can do this. A pause. No, she's healthy enough. Another pause. The retirement home nearby has excellent reviews. My hands froze around the coffee mug. Retirement home. I wasn't angry. I was terrified. Had I really become that inconvenient? That evening Michael came home unusually late. Vanessa met him near the staircase. They thought I had already gone to bed. I hadn't. Their voices drifted through the hallway. We need to make a decision. I know. We can't keep living like this. Another silence. Then came the sentence that shattered every beautiful memory I had spent decades building. Michael sighed deeply. I love Mom. His voice cracked for just a second. But she's becoming a burden. Burden. The word echoed inside my chest. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. Surely I had misunderstood. Surely this was a nightmare. My little boy. The same child whose fever I had sat beside for 6 straight nights. The same child whose college tuition had been paid with my mother's necklace. The same little boy who once cried whenever I left him at kindergarten. Now, I was a burden. I slowly returned to my room. I closed the door without making a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed until sunrise. I never slept. The next morning I smiled as though nothing had happened. I packed Emma's lunch. Made Jacob's pancakes. Folded Michael's shirts. Watered Vanessa's flowers. No one noticed my trembling hands. No one noticed I hadn't eaten. No one noticed that something inside me had quietly died the night before. Except one person. Emma. She looked at me during breakfast, with tears already filling her little eyes. She reached beneath the table and slipped a folded note into my hand. "Don't read it here," she whispered. I waited until everyone left the house. Then I unfolded the tiny piece of paper. The shaky handwriting made my heart pound before I had even read the first sentence. And after reading those few simple words, I realized my granddaughter knew a secret that could change everything, and someone in this family was desperately hoping I would never discover it. I closed my bedroom door before unfolding Emma's tiny note. The paper had been torn from one of her school notebooks. The edges were uneven, and a faint pink crayon mark crossed one corner. Her handwriting was crooked, innocent, and painfully sincere. "Grandma, please don't leave. I heard Mom and Dad talking. Dad cried after you went upstairs. I don't think he wants to hurt you. Please don't be mad at him." I read those words once. Then again. Then a third time. My vision blurred until the letters melted together. Michael had cried. That didn't erase what he had said. Nothing could erase that. But somewhere inside me, a small piece of hope refused to die. Perhaps my son was trapped between love and pressure. Perhaps he was making a terrible mistake. Or perhaps I had simply become too willing to make excuses for everyone except myself. I folded Emma's note carefully and slipped it inside the old journal I had carried from my house. For 47 years that journal had held birthdays, anniversaries, recipes Daniel loved, dreams, disappointments, and prayers. Now it carried one more memory. One written by the smallest member of our family. That afternoon, I decided to visit my old house. "I just want to check the mailbox," I told Vanessa. She looked relieved. "Take your time." Relieved. The word stung more than I expected. Michael was already at work, so I quietly took the bus across town. As the familiar streets appeared through the window, my heart beat faster. There it was. The little white house. The paint had faded. The roses Daniel planted years ago had grown wild. The porch creaked beneath my feet exactly as it always had. It almost felt as though the house recognized me. "Hello," I whispered. "I'm home." The silence wrapped around me like an old friend. Dust floated through the sunlight. Daniel's favorite chair still stood beside the fireplace. The old clock continued ticking. Slow. Steady. Faithful. Unlike people, clocks never pretend. They simply keep telling the truth. I walked into our bedroom and opened the closet. His jacket still hung where he had left it. Without thinking, I buried my face against it. The scent had almost disappeared. Almost. "Oh, Daniel." The tears came quietly. I tried. I really tried. I thought our son still needed me. A laugh escaped through my tears. Funny, wasn't it? When children are little, they need us to survive. When they grow older, sometimes they only need us to disappear. After collecting the mail, I noticed an envelope resting beneath the front door. No stamp, No address. Only my name. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. The handwriting looked strangely familiar. I frowned. Inside was a single folded sheet. If you ever feel unwanted, don't make any decisions until you speak with Mr. Howard Bennett. At the bottom was a phone number. No explanation. No signature. Only 3 words. He knows everything. Everything. My heart skipped. Who was Howard Bennett? And what exactly did he know? I searched my memory. Then suddenly it came rushing back. Howard Bennett. Daniel's attorney. The same lawyer who had helped us write our wills nearly 15 years ago. Why would someone send me to him now? I slipped the letter into my purse. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe someone had made a mistake. But something deep inside me whispered, go. The next morning, while everyone was busy, I called the number. A calm voice answered. Mr. Bennett's office. My name is Eleanor Brooks. There was a brief silence. Then the receptionist spoke again, almost surprised. Mrs. Brooks. Mr. Bennett has been expecting your call. Expecting? I don't understand. He asked us to schedule your appointment immediately whenever you contacted us. My fingers tightened around the phone. When? Tomorrow morning at 10. I almost said no. Instead, I'll be there. That evening I returned to Michael's house carrying groceries. Vanessa barely looked up from her phone. Michael was sitting at the dining table staring into space. He looked exhausted. Older somehow. For a brief second, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. He looked at me. Mom. Yes? We need to talk. I smiled gently. Of course. Vanessa immediately interrupted. Maybe after dinner. Michael nodded. Yeah, after dinner. But dinner came. Then dishes. Then television. Then bedtime. The conversation never happened. Some talks are postponed because people are busy. Others. Because they are afraid. The next morning I dressed carefully. I wore the same navy blue dress I had worn to Emma's school graduation. I brushed my silver hair slowly. Then I placed Daniel's wedding ring inside my purse. I wish you were coming with me, I whispered. For the first time in months, I felt nervous. Not frightened. Just as though my life had quietly reached the edge of something important. Mr. Howard Bennett's office hadn't changed in years. The same wooden shelves. The same framed certificates. The same gentle smell of old books and polished oak. When the receptionist opened the office door, an elderly man stood waiting. The moment he saw me, his expression softened. Eleanor. His voice carried genuine warmth. I'm so sorry. He stepped forward and gently shook my hand with both of his. I should have called sooner. I frowned. Called about what? Instead of answering, he walked to an old filing cabinet. He unlocked the bottom drawer. Then another. Finally, he removed a thick brown folder tied neatly with a faded blue ribbon. He placed it carefully on the desk between us. I've kept this safe exactly as Daniel instructed. My heart pounded. Daniel. Mr. Bennett rested his hand on the folder. Your husband left very specific instructions. I stared at the ribbon. My fingers trembled before even touching it. What instructions? The lawyer looked directly into my eyes. He told me this file was never to be opened. His voice became quieter. Unless the day came when you believed your own family no longer wanted you. The room suddenly felt impossibly still. My breath caught. How could Daniel have known? What had he seen all those years ago that I had completely missed? And as Mr. Bennet slowly untied the faded blue ribbon, I noticed one sealed envelope lying on top of the documents. Across the front, in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting, were words that made my heart stop. Read this only after you have heard what our son says about you. My hands refused to move. The envelope rested on the polished oak desk, as though it had been waiting for this very moment for years. Daniel's handwriting. There was no mistaking it. The same careful letters that had once filled birthday cards, grocery lists, and little notes tucked inside my lunchbox whenever I worked long hours cleaning houses. Don't forget to smile today. I love you more than yesterday. Dinner is waiting. Those simple notes had carried me through difficult days. Now this one frightened me. Mr. Howard Bennet quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk. You don't have to rush. I looked at him. Did Daniel know something I didn't? The lawyer folded his hands. Daniel noticed things that many people missed. I lowered my eyes. That sounded exactly like my husband. He had always watched quietly before speaking. He understood people without them realizing they had revealed anything. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a single folded letter. The paper had yellowed with age. I unfolded it carefully. The first line alone stole the air from my lungs. My dearest Eleanor. If you're reading this, then my greatest fear has come true. A tear landed on the page. I quickly wiped it away. Daniel's words continued. You are probably blaming yourself. I laughed softly through my tears. He's right. I had blamed myself every single day. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I wasn't useful anymore. Maybe I occupied too much space. Maybe. Daniel had known me well enough to predict every thought. His next sentence shattered every excuse I had been making. Please stop apologizing for growing old. Aging is not a crime. It is the privilege we earn by loving long enough to reach it. I covered my mouth. The room blurred. Mr. Bennet quietly looked away, giving me the privacy to cry. I kept reading. You spent your entire life giving. You gave up sleep for our son. You gave up dreams for our family. You gave away your mother's necklace so Michael could attend college. You even lied to protect my pride whenever I couldn't provide enough. Fresh tears rolled down my cheeks. I had never told anyone about that necklace. Not even Michael. Daniel had known. Of course he had known. He always knew. The letter continued. One day, our son may forget what sacrifices built his future. People don't always become cruel. Sometimes they simply become distracted by life, until gratitude quietly disappears. If that day ever comes, promise me something. I whispered aloud before reading further. I promise. The next sentence nearly broke me. Do not beg anyone to love you. A sob escaped before I could stop it. I had been doing exactly that. Trying harder. Cooking more. Cleaning more. Speaking less. Smiling through pain. Shrinking myself little by little, hoping I could become easy enough to keep. Daniel had seen this possibility years before it happened. He knew me too well. The letter ended with words that felt like his arms wrapping around my shoulders one last time. Remember who you are. You are not a burden. You are the foundation upon which this family was built. And foundations should never apologize, because others forgot who poured the concrete. Forever yours. Daniel. The room became completely silent. I pressed the letter against my heart. For several long moments, neither Mr. Bennet nor I spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. Eleanor. I looked up. There is something else. He gently untied the blue ribbon around the larger file. Inside were legal documents. Property records. Investment statements. Insurance papers. Some I recognized. Most I did not. Mr. Bennet adjusted his glasses. Daniel updated his estate plan several times before he passed away. I frowned. I thought everything had already been settled. So did everyone else. What do you mean? He carefully removed another document. Daniel divided the estate into 2 sections. I don't understand. The first section was made public after his death. I nodded slowly. Michael inherited part of the savings. Yes. And you received ownership of the house and your retirement accounts. That's right. Mr. Bennet took a deep breath. But there was a second section. I stared at him. It remained completely confidential. My heartbeat quickened. Why? Because Daniel specifically instructed me not to reveal it unless one condition was met. I almost whispered. What condition? Mr. Bennet looked directly into my eyes. If your own child ever treated you as a burden. I closed my eyes. Daniel. How could you possibly have seen this coming? The lawyer continued. He believed people often reveal their true character after they think everything has already been inherited. I slowly sank back into my chair. The office suddenly felt smaller. Every word Daniel had written echoed inside my mind. Mr. Bennet opened another folder. There is one more letter. Another. This one isn't for you. I looked at the envelope. Across the front, in bold handwriting, were 4 words. For my son. I swallowed hard. What does it say? Mr. Bennet gently shook his head. I've never opened it. Daniel instructed that it must only be read aloud. He glanced toward the office door. If Michael was present. My pulse raced. So he doesn't know. No. No one knows. A strange mixture of sadness and curiosity filled my heart. What else is in these files? The lawyer hesitated. Then he quietly turned one final document toward me. At the bottom of the page was a number. I blinked once. Twice. Surely I had read it wrong. I leaned closer. No. It was real. The amount wasn't thousands. It wasn't even hundreds of thousands. It was enough to change several lives forever. I looked at Mr. Bennet in complete disbelief. Daniel had this. The lawyer smiled gently. He built it slowly over decades. But we never lived like wealthy people. He wanted security. For you. My hands trembled again. So Michael has no idea. None. And neither does Vanessa. Mr. Bennet carefully closed the folder. According to Daniel's instructions, they will learn about everything only after attending one final meeting. Whenever you're ready. I looked down at Daniel's letter one more time. The tears had stopped. For the first time in months. I wasn't crying because I felt unwanted. I was crying because, even after death, my husband had somehow found one last way to protect me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what would happen when Michael sat across from that lawyer, smiled politely, and heard the words hidden on the final page that his father had written years before. For the next 3 days, I said nothing. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted my heart to be calm before anyone else's was confronted. Daniel had always told me, never make the biggest decisions while your tears are still wet. So I waited. I still woke before sunrise. I still packed Emma's lunch. I still reminded Jacob to tie his shoes properly. I still watered Vanessa's flowers. But something inside me had changed. I was no longer trying to earn my place. I finally understood something Daniel had known all along. Love should never require permission. On Thursday evening, Mr. Bennet called. Mrs. Brooks. Yes. Everything is prepared. I took a slow breath. I think it's time. He paused. I'll arrange the meeting for Monday morning. Should I tell Michael why? No. Simply ask him to come. When I hung up, I found Emma standing quietly in the hallway. She had probably heard my voice. Grandma. Yes, sweetheart. Are you leaving? Her little lip trembled. I knelt despite the ache in my knees. Oh, honey. I wrapped my arms around her. I could never leave you in my heart. She hugged me so tightly that I could hardly breathe. I don't like it when Mommy says you're old. The words caught me off guard. What? Emma looked down. Sometimes she says old people make everything harder. My heart sank. Children hear everything. Even the things adults believe are whispered. I gently lifted her chin. Promise me something. What? No matter how old someone becomes. I smiled through gathering tears. Always remember, they were once the person carrying you when you couldn't walk. She nodded without hesitation. I promise. That night, I barely slept. Not because I feared Monday. Because I wondered whether my family could survive it. Monday morning arrived beneath grey skies. Michael drove us to Mr. Bennet's office. Vanessa insisted on coming. So we all know what's going on. Her voice carried curiosity more than concern. Jacob stayed at school. Emma begged to come. Vanessa refused. This is adult business. As the car pulled into the parking lot, Michael glanced toward me. You've been quiet lately, Mom. I smiled softly. I've been thinking. About what? About how quickly time passes. He looked confused. I guess it does. Neither of us spoke again. Mr. Bennet greeted us warmly. Good morning. His eyes met mine for only a brief moment. A silent reassurance. Everything is ready. We entered the conference room. A long wooden table. 4 chairs on one side. One on the other. The air felt unusually heavy. Vanessa looked around impatiently. I still don't understand why we're here. Mr. Bennet calmly opened the familiar brown folder. You will. He waited until everyone was seated. Then he folded his hands. I was the attorney for Daniel Brooks for nearly 20 years. Michael smiled faintly. I remember. He trusted me with several confidential legal instructions. Michael nodded again. Okay. Mr. Bennet looked directly at him. Some of those instructions could only be carried out after certain conditions had been met. Vanessa leaned forward. What conditions? The lawyer answered without emotion. That Mrs. Eleanor Brooks be treated as an unwanted burden by her immediate family. Silence. Absolute silence. Michael frowned. What? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. There must be some misunderstanding. Mr. Bennet calmly picked up a document. There is no misunderstanding. He looked toward Michael. Several days ago, your mother informed me that she heard you describe her as a burden. Michael's face immediately lost its color. He turned slowly toward me. Mom. His voice barely escaped. You heard that? I nodded once. Nothing more. His shoulders dropped as though someone had placed the weight of the world upon them. Oh God. He covered his face with both hands. I didn't. His voice cracked. I didn't know you were there. The room became painfully quiet. Vanessa reached for his arm. Michael. He gently pulled away. No. His eyes filled with tears. No excuses. He looked at me. I said it. His lips trembled. I actually said it. The little boy I had raised suddenly appeared beneath the face of the grown man before me. Broken. Ashamed. I've wanted to apologize every day. You knew? I asked quietly. He nodded. I heard your bedroom door close. I knew you'd heard us. Then why didn't you come to me? A tear rolled down his cheek. Because every day it became harder. I kept telling myself tomorrow. His voice grew weaker. Then tomorrow became another tomorrow. I closed my eyes. How many families are destroyed by conversations postponed? How many hearts break because pride speaks louder than love? Mr. Bennet allowed the silence to settle before speaking again. There is more. He lifted a sealed envelope. Across the front were the words. For my son. Michael stared at his father's handwriting. His breathing became uneven. Dad wrote that. Yes. He instructed me to read it aloud only if today's meeting ever became necessary. Michael whispered. I don't deserve to hear it. Mr. Bennet slowly opened the envelope. The paper inside had aged just like Daniel's letter to me. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Then he began to read. My dear son. Michael immediately lowered his head. I pray you never hear this letter. A tear slipped onto the table. If you are listening now. Mr. Bennet continued. Then somewhere along the road of success, responsibility, and ordinary life. You forgot the woman who taught you how to walk. Michael began crying quietly. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just the helpless tears of a man who suddenly saw himself through his father's eyes. But Mr. Bennet had not yet reached the final page. And judging by the look on his face, the words Daniel had saved for the end were about to change every life sitting around that table forever. The room became so quiet that even the ticking of the old wall clock sounded loud. No one moved. No one spoke. Mr. Howard Bennet turned to the final page of Daniel's letter with extraordinary care, as though he understood that the words written there carried the weight of an entire family's future. Michael sat motionless. His eyes never left the letter. The confident businessman who negotiated million-dollar contracts now looked exactly like the frightened little boy who once hid behind my dress whenever thunder shook the windows. Mr. Bennet cleared his throat. His voice remained calm. But before I read the last page, Daniel instructed me to ask his son one question. He looked directly at Michael. If your mother had nothing left to give you, if there were no money, no house, no inheritance, no savings, would you still choose to keep her in your home? The question hung in the air. Michael didn't answer immediately. His shoulders shook. He covered his face with both hands. His voice cracked. I don't know how I became this man. He slowly lowered his hands and looked at me. When Dad was dying, I promised him I would always protect you. Fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. I broke that promise. He turned toward Vanessa. I let work become my excuse. I let stress become my excuse. I let silence become my excuse. Then he looked back at me. But none of those are reasons. They are failures. His words were barely louder than whispers. I failed you, Mom. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since I had known her, the confidence she always carried disappeared completely. She wiped her face. I owe you an apology too. She looked at me with trembling lips. When you first moved in, I truly wanted us to be a family. I really did. She paused. Then everything became overwhelming. The children. My job. The bills. My own parents needing help. I started seeing every problem as another burden. Her voice broke. And without realizing it, I started seeing you as one of those problems. She covered her mouth, unable to continue. I am so ashamed. No one spoke. Sometimes guilt punishes people more deeply than any accusation ever could. Mr. Bennet quietly nodded. Then he continued reading Daniel's letter. Michael. If your eyes are filled with tears, I hope they are not tears of fear over losing an inheritance. I hope they are tears of recognition. Because money can replace many things. Character cannot. Michael closed his eyes. The lawyer continued. Your mother spent thousands of nights awake because of you. If you ever think caring for her has become inconvenient, remember that she cared for you before you could even ask for help. She never called you a burden when you cried all night. She never complained when she worked until her hands bled so you could have schoolbooks. Love keeps no score. The tears that had been quietly flowing down Michael's face became impossible to hide. I remember. He whispered. I remember coming home from school and seeing Mom sewing late into the night. He looked at me. I never knew why. I smiled sadly. You didn't need to. He shook his head. I should have asked. Mr. Bennet reached the final paragraph. He looked up once. Then slowly read the last words Daniel had ever written to his son. If you have truly forgotten your mother, then you have already lost something far greater than anything written in my will. But if today becomes the day you remember who you are, then tear up every expectation of inheritance. Take your mother's hand. Drive her home. Sit beside her. Ask her to tell you stories you have been too busy to hear. Because one day, you will wish for just one more conversation. One more laugh. One more hug. One more chance to say, thank you. Do not wait until flowers on a grave become easier than words spoken to a living mother. The letter ended. No dramatic speech followed. No argument. Only silence. Then, Michael stood. Slowly. His chair scraped against the wooden floor. He walked around the table. Every step seemed heavier than the last. When he reached me, he fell to his knees. Not because anyone asked him to. Because his heart finally did. He gently took my trembling hands into his own. I'm so sorry. His voice disappeared beneath quiet sobs. I'm sorry for every phone call I never returned. I'm sorry for every dinner you ate alone. I'm sorry for every time I stayed silent when I should have defended you. He rested his forehead against my hands exactly as he had done when he was 5 years old after breaking the neighbor's window with a baseball. Back then, I had forgiven him before he even apologized. Today, the pain was much deeper. But so was my love. I lifted his face. His eyes were red, filled with genuine regret. My son, I whispered. I never stopped loving you. He cried even harder. I don't deserve that. No child earns a mother's love. I gently brushed the tears from his cheek. They are simply born with it. Across the room, Vanessa quietly wept. Even Mr. Bennet removed his glasses for a moment. He looked out the window, giving our family the privacy to put broken pieces back together. After several minutes, Michael finally sat beside me instead of across from me. He held my hand tightly, as though afraid I might disappear. Then Mr. Bennet reached for the thick legal folder one final time. There is still one matter remaining. Michael looked up, confused. What matter? The lawyer rested his hand on the estate documents. The inheritance. Michael immediately shook his head. I don't want it. I don't care what's in those papers. Mr. Bennet gave a faint smile. I understand. But Daniel specifically instructed me that the final page of his estate must still be read aloud. Michael looked at me. Then back at the lawyer. I don't think anything else could surprise me today. Mr. Bennet slowly opened the last document. His eyes scanned the page. For the first time that morning, even the lawyer looked astonished. He removed his glasses. Read the page again. Then looked directly at all three of us. I have practiced law for over 40 years. And I have never seen a will written like this. He placed the final page gently on the table. My friends. Daniel Brooks saved his greatest surprise for the very last sentence. And as Mr. Bennet began reading those final lines, every person in the room realized that the inheritance was never really about money. It was about proving whether a family deserved the priceless gift that had been standing beside them all along. No one reached for the papers. No one asked how much money there was. The room had already become richer in something far more valuable. Still, Daniel had left instructions. And Daniel had always believed that promises should be kept. Mr. Howard Bennet carefully adjusted the final page in front of him. I'll read it exactly as your husband wrote it, he said softly. He looked toward me. I nodded. Please. He began. To my wife, Eleanor. To my son, Michael. And to anyone sitting in this room after I am gone. This is the final page of my life, so I hope it becomes the first page of yours. Michael lowered his head again. Mr. Bennet continued. If this letter is being read, then my family has already experienced enough pain. I refuse to let money create even more. He turned another sheet. Everything I own, every investment, every account, every piece of property that remained hidden, legally belongs to Eleanor Brooks. Vanessa quietly inhaled. Michael didn't even react. He simply continued holding my hand. The lawyer kept reading. Not because she needs permission to own it, but because she earned every single penny beside me. I couldn't stop the tears. 4 years I had believed Daniel had been the provider. Now, even after his death, he was making sure the world knew the truth. We had built everything together. Every sacrifice. Every late-night job. Every dream postponed. Every dollar saved. Mr. Bennet smiled gently before continuing. However, a faint laugh escaped him. I knew there would be a however, he murmured. Even through our tears, Michael managed the smallest smile. That sounded exactly like his father. The lawyer continued. After Eleanor's lifetime, everything will pass to Michael. Michael immediately shook his head. No. Mr. Bennet raised a hand. There's more. He continued reading. Only if one condition is fulfilled. The room became silent again. My attorney is instructed to ask only one question. Michael. During the remaining years of your mother's life. Did you love her because she was your mother? Or because you hoped to inherit what she owned? Mr. Bennet lowered the page. He looked directly into Michael's eyes. My answer has already been decided. Michael looked confused. What do you mean? The will gives me legal discretion. Vanessa blinked. You? Yes. Daniel trusted me to observe. 4 years. He opened another envelope. Inside were handwritten notes. Dates. Visits. Phone calls. Christmases. Birthdays. Even hospital records. Daniel had instructed Mr. Bennet to quietly check on me every few months after his death. Not to interfere. Only to watch. Mr. Bennet spoke gently. I've known for quite some time that Mrs. Brooks was becoming increasingly isolated. Michael's face filled with shame. You knew. I did. Why didn't you tell me? Because Daniel believed some lessons cannot be taught. They must be discovered. The lawyer closed the notebook. Today, you discovered yours. Michael nodded slowly. I did. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. Mr. Bennet smiled kindly. I believe you. Then he reached the very bottom of the final page. There is one last paragraph. His voice softened. Almost as though Daniel himself was speaking through him. Michael. If your mother forgives you, then never ask whether you deserve it. Simply become the son who deserves it tomorrow. The words landed gently. Yet they struck harder than any accusation ever could. Michael buried his face in his hands again. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself. I reached over and lifted his chin. You don't have to live in yesterday forever. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I hurt the person who loved me the most. You did. I can't change it. No. So what do I do? I smiled through tears. The same thing I taught you when you fell off your bicycle. His eyebrows drew together. You remember? I remember everything. You stood up. You cleaned your wounds. And then I squeezed his hand. You learned not to fall the same way twice. For the first time that day. Michael laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. It came through tears. The kind of laugh that appears when hope quietly returns after believing it had disappeared forever. Even Vanessa smiled through her crying. She walked over and knelt beside my chair. Eleanor. Her voice trembled. I don't expect forgiveness today. I know. I don't even expect it this year. I gently placed my free hand over hers. But I'd like the chance to earn back your trust. I looked into her eyes. Trust. Unlike money. It grows slowly. And once broken, it asks for patience. You have that chance. She closed her eyes in relief. Thank you. At that moment, there was a soft knock on the conference room door. The receptionist smiled apologetically. I'm sorry to interrupt. She looked at me. Mrs. Brooks. Your granddaughter is here. Michael looked surprised. Emma. The receptionist nodded. She insisted on coming. Before anyone could answer, the little girl rushed into the room. She ran straight toward me. Grandma. I opened my arms. She nearly knocked me backward with the force of her hug. I was scared you'd never come home. I kissed the top of her head. Oh, sweetheart. I'm going home. She looked up with hopeful eyes. With us? The room became silent once again. Everyone waited for my answer. I looked at my son. Then at Vanessa. Then at the little girl holding my hand as though it were the most precious treasure in the world. For a long moment, I didn't speak. Because sometimes the hardest decision isn't whether to forgive. It's whether to trust that forgiveness can become a new beginning. And whatever answer I gave next, it would shape the rest of our family's story forever. I'll conclude the story with an emotional, hopeful ending that fits the tone of the previous parts and remains YouTube friendly. Emma's little hand remained wrapped around mine. So? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you coming home with us? I looked at her beautiful, hopeful face. Then I looked at Michael. His eyes held no expectation. Only regret. Only hope. Only the silent prayer that every child carries after making the biggest mistake of their life. I smiled gently. My dear, I said to Emma, I'll come home. She squealed with happiness and threw both arms around my neck. I knew you would. The room filled with quiet laughter. Not because everything had suddenly become perfect, but because hope had finally walked back through the door. Michael stood frozen. You'll really give me another chance? I nodded. I'm giving my son another chance. I reached out and took his hand. But understand something. He swallowed hard. I'm not coming home, because I have nowhere else to go. His eyes filled with tears. I'm coming home, because families are worth fighting for. He lowered his head. I won't waste it. I know. Those 2 words meant more than 1,000 speeches. Over the next few weeks, our family changed in ways I never expected. Not overnight. Real healing never happens overnight. It happens one conversation, one apology, one act of kindness at a time. Michael insisted on driving me to every doctor's appointment. Not because he felt guilty. Because he wanted to be there. Every Saturday morning, he made breakfast. His pancakes were terrible. The first batch looked more like burnt maps than food. Emma laughed until milk came out of her nose. Jacob declared them crispy disasters. Even I couldn't stop laughing. Michael scratched the back of his head. I think Dad would be making fun of me. I smiled. He absolutely would. We laughed together. Really laughed. For the first time in years. One afternoon, Vanessa knocked softly on my bedroom door. She held a small wooden box in her hands. I found this while cleaning the attic. Inside was my old sewing kit. The very one I had used to stitch clothes together while saving every penny for Michael's education. She gently placed it in my lap. I never understood what these meant. She wiped away a tear. Now I do. She sat beside me. I've been thinking. I looked at her. When Emma grows up, I want her to remember how you loved people. She hesitated. Would you teach her to sew? A tear rolled down my cheek. I'd be honored. Every Tuesday after school, Emma and I sat together near the living room window. Her tiny fingers struggled to guide the thread through the needle. She sighed dramatically. This is impossible. I laughed. So did your father. She looked surprised. Dad sews? Oh, goodness, no. He gave up after 5 minutes. She burst into laughter. That evening, Michael walked into the room. What are you laughing about? Emma grinned. Grandma told me you were bad at sewing. Michael groaned dramatically. Some family secrets are supposed to stay secret. The house echoed with laughter. The kind of laughter that had been missing for far too long. Months passed. One Sunday, Michael asked if I wanted to visit the old house. When we arrived, the roses Daniel had planted were blooming brighter than I had ever seen. Michael quietly walked beside me. "I'm sorry I let this place become lonely." I squeezed his arm. "It isn't lonely anymore." He looked confused. "It never was." I smiled toward the porch. "Your father filled it with enough love to last several lifetimes." Together, we cleaned every room. Jacob dusted furniture. Emma watered the roses. Vanessa polished the old dining table. Michael carefully repaired the porch step where I had once fallen. By sunset, the little white house looked alive again. Before leaving, Michael handed me a small brass key. "I've been thinking." He smiled nervously. "This house shouldn't stay empty." "What do you mean?" "I'd like to renovate it. So every Sunday." He looked toward the children. "Our whole family comes here. No phones. No work. No excuses. Just us." My heart overflowed. Daniel had always dreamed that this house would remain filled with family. Now, it would. 1 year later, on Daniel's birthday, we gathered around the old oak dining table. The same table where Michael had once done his homework. The same table where birthdays had been celebrated. The same table where tears and laughter had shared equal space. Emma stood holding a tiny homemade card. "Can I read something?" "Of course," I whispered. She unfolded the paper. "My teacher asked us who our hero is." She smiled at me. I wrote about my grandma. My breath caught. She continued. "My grandma says people grow old on the outside. But love never gets old. I want to grow up just like her." The room became perfectly still. Vanessa quietly wiped away tears. Jacob smiled proudly. Michael couldn't speak at all. He simply reached across the table and held my hand. Years earlier, those same hands had felt unwanted. Now, they were never empty. After dinner, Michael walked onto the porch with me. The evening breeze carried the familiar scent of roses. "I'm still trying to forgive myself," he admitted quietly. I looked toward the sunset. "Don't spend your life staring at the chapter you regret." He looked at me. "Your father wrote the final page." I smiled. "But you still get to write the next one." He wrapped his arm around my shoulders exactly as Daniel used to. "I love you, Mom." The words were simple. But they were spoken while I could still hear them. And that made all the difference. Sometimes people believe the greatest inheritance is hidden inside bank accounts. Or locked inside old safes. Or written in legal documents. They are wrong. The greatest inheritance a parent can leave behind is a family that remembers how to love each other before it is too late. Daniel's money eventually helped secure the future of his children and grandchildren. But no dollar in that estate ever became as valuable as the lesson hidden on the final page. Years later, when my own hair turned completely white, and my steps became slower than ever, I would often sit on the porch watching Emma and Jacob chase their children across the same yard where their father had once played. The house was noisy again. The kitchen was warm again. My heart was whole again. And every evening, before the sun slipped behind the hills, I would glance toward Daniel's old chair by the window and smile. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "I brought our family home." And somehow, in the gentle rustling of the roses he had planted with his own hands, I could almost hear his familiar laugh floating through the evening air. For the first time in many years, it no longer sounded like goodbye. It sounded like home. Thanks for watching the story. If you watched the full story and love it, then subscribe our YouTube channel for upcoming videos and also share video with friends, family and your lover.